This is the Easy Guide to Medical Statistics, Part 3B, putting it all together, and I'm also going to introduce categorical data. So remember, you decide what to study, you choose your population, you gather their risks and show hopefully that they're equal, you enter the variable you want to study and evaluate whether the outcome differs. We're going to look at this study. You can pull it up. It's the aspirin trial, low-dose aspirin for the prevention of preterm delivery in nulliparous women with a singleton pregnancy, a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial. The first, of course, is to decide what to study. The background is that meta-analyses of low-dose aspirin to prevent preeclampsia suggest that the incidence of preterm birth might also be decreased, particularly if initiated before 16 weeks. Their hypothesis then for this aspirin trial is that if they administer aspirin from 6 weeks and before 14 weeks, that they will get a reduction in the incidence of preterm delivery in women having their first baby and a singleton pregnancy. So who, where, when did they enroll? 7 sites in 6 countries, and here are the different countries from 2016 to 2019. Women were required to be pregnant from 6 weeks, but not more than 14 weeks, as confirmed by an ultrasound. I put that here because in many of these countries, they may not otherwise have an opportunity to have an ultrasound. And then they randomize these women to aspirin or placebo. So note their exclusions. They stuck mostly to adults and not minors, and they excluded women who were allergic to aspirin or who might have been taking aspirin because that would be confounding, multiple gestations, more than 2 pregnancy losses or miscarriage. Again, there's possibility of some undiagnosed condition, and other medical conditions such as diabetes and high blood pressure, because those women often have to deliver early. A hemoglobin less than 7 in some of these regions, you might have to think of things like malaria and nutrition and fetal anomalies. So here is a typical flow chart that you might see, or flow diagram, and this is how many women were evaluated, and so many were excluded, and then this number was randomized. Remember, they estimated they needed 11,920, which they have, more than that here, to end up with 5,500 in each arm. And you'll see that they actually had less attrition than they had planned. They really only lost 3, maybe 4% total. So next you gather the risks and show that they are equal, or hopefully you show they're equal. So here are characteristics, or the risk factors, in the 2 groups, the aspirin and the placebo. So note that I had said that you have continuous variables, so all these, height, weight, continuous, and that there's dichotomous. And here, what they've done is they've actually broken these down into categories, or categorical data, which really is just a step further than a dichotomous variable, because dichotomous is basically a category with only 2 categories, whereas these have 3 and here 4. So don't despair, there's a 2x3 contingency table calculator too, and this is the one we're going to use. It's Vassar Stats. And we are going to look at age. This is the Vassar Stats 2x3 contingency table calculator. So just keep in mind that if you have data in a spreadsheet or a table, the data is often given in columns going vertically, whereas here we're going horizontally. So this is going to be the women under 20, the women 20 to 29, and women over 30 in each of our 2 groups, our aspirin group and our placebo group. And we enter in the data, we hit calculate, our chi-squared statistics is 0.81, and our p-value is 0.67. So these 2 groups are not statistically significantly different. So let's also look at a 2x4 table, and now we're going to look at social science statistics, just for variety, and we're going to look at maternal education. This is social science statistics, and this is a 5x5 contingency table calculator, or rather you can have up to 5x5. So I've put in my labels here and the different classes of education. Again, you don't have to do this. And then it lets you put in the data. Okay, so now I've put in the data of the two groups and I hit next. And it asks for your significance level. And it tells us the chi-square statistic and the p-value, showing that these two groups are not statistically significantly different. So you enter the variable you want to study. In this case, they put half of the women on aspirin and half on placebo, and then you evaluate whether the outcome differs. So what did they find? So essentially, they found their primary outcome here, preterm delivery, decreased by 11%. So it went from 13.1 to 11.6, which is a relative risk of 0.89. If you were to subtract this from 1, you would get 0.11. That's how you get 11%. And the p-value is less than 0.05. This is statistically significant. So knowledge test. Do you think gathering such a large population of 12,000 women warrants the use of a relative risk or an odds ratio? So remember, the relative risk is often used in prospective, multi-centered studies with many participants, such as this one. So yes, a risk ratio or relative risk would be appropriate here. They found their primary outcome here, preterm delivery, decreased by 11%. They showed an 11% decrease in preterm delivery, but did they reach a power of 90%, which is what they wanted? So we're going to go back to ClinCalc here, if you plug this in, and we're going to see, did they get a power of 90%? This is the sample size calculator by ClinCalc, and we've used this before. If you scroll down, you can do a post hoc power analysis. Now we can add what the study found. So we put in the data, and then we hit calculate. The power was approximately 70%. And not the 90% that they had wanted to achieve. However, this also talks about the dangers of post hoc analysis, which you should probably look through. So then there were some other conclusions. They had secondary maternal outcomes and fetal outcomes. And you can kind of go down your p-values and pick out the ones that are significant or almost significant. And the real big one here is that early preterm delivery, less than 34 weeks, dropped by 25% and was significant. So that really is a nice finding for them. They also looked at safety issues. You might note here that maternal deaths is kind of high in these areas, but there's no difference in the two groups. And women did not have more hemorrhage before or after delivery, no more anemia. And ironically, no change in eclampsia or preeclampsia, as we are putting women on aspirin to prevent. And also babies, and they were not more likely to have a miscarriage or termination. And so then in the discussion, you put your strengths and weaknesses. And of course, the strengths is that this is a multi-center, global, with a lot of community engagement. And they did reach all their numbers. However, they did underestimate the actual incidence of preterm delivery or preterm birth. It dropped from 13 to 11.6. But then they say that there really weren't any accurate estimates in these areas. Aspirin did not achieve the projected reduction of 20%. However, it did significantly reduce preterm births by 11%, as we saw, and it was significant. So I hope you feel more confident.